The ice groaned beneath her feet, a sound Anya didn't hear, but felt in every fiber of her being, a deadly vibration that heralded the abyss. My grandchildren, she thought, terror chilling her blood more than the 70 air that tore across the tundra. Before her, not only the treacherous crack that swallowed hope beneath the frozen lake, but an indescribable horde of beasts, 700 Goloso with hungry eyes and sharp teeth, surrounding the children trapped on the thin layer of ice. She had to act, with the life of her tribe hanging by a thread, but one false step would mean death for all. And what she did next defied all logic of survival. With her eyes fixed on the small specks of color against the infinite white, her grandchildren and the other young people of the village huddled in terror, Anya felt a different, deeper tremor coming from the ground. It wasn't the ice, but the earth, responding to the hungry mass approaching. She pressed her thin lips together, a deep wrinkle marking her aged forehead. There was no time to hesitate. The old YAKUT woman, with the agility that age and deafness had not stolen, took a small leather pouch from her belt. Inside, she kept a handful of dried herbs and aromatic resins, used in ancient rituals to appease the spirits of nature. This time, however, its purpose would be different. Her fingers, calloused by work and cold, quickly worked to light a small fire with a piece of flint and some dry moss she always carried. The flame, tiny and fragile, flickered in the icy vastness, a point of warmth and light in the impending darkness. She threw the herbs and resins onto the fire, and dense, fragrant smoke began to rise, carried by the biting wind. The strong, unusual scent spread quickly across the tundra, mixing with the icy air. Anya knew that the Goloso, with their keen sense of smell, would be attracted by that strange fragrance, a momentary distraction that could buy precious seconds. The children's eyes, wide with fear, turned to her. They didn't understand what Anya was doing. They only saw the smoke and the elder's diminutive figure, who seemed to defy death itself with her apparent calm. Her lips moved, but no sound reached Anya. She, however, understood the despair in their faces, their silent plea. Her grandchildren, little Boris and sweet Lena, were closest to the crack, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Anya felt the vibration of the ice beneath her own feet intensify, a clear warning that time was running out. The Goloso, previously focused on the easy prey on the ice, began to show signs of confusion. Their growls, which Anya didn't hear but felt as a tremor in the ground, became more hesitant. Some of them turned their enormous heads, sniffing the air, attracted by the spreading smoke. It was the first step of her audacious plan, a gamble against wild nature and time. Anya knew the distraction wouldn't last long. She needed more, a move that would draw them away, even for an instant, to give the children a chance. Her mind worked feverishly, connecting the earth's signals, the wind's scent, and the beast's presence, searching for the next move on that chessboard of ice and death. Her mind worked feverishly, connecting the earth's signals, the wind's scent, and the beast's presence, searching for the next move on that chessboard of ice and death. Anya closed her eyes for an instant, concentrating on the vibrations rising from the ice, as if the earth itself whispered secrets to her. She felt the fragility of the surface, the cold current beneath, and the exact location of the most dangerous fissures. Her plan now was clear. It was an immense risk, but the only chance. She opened her eyes and, with a swift movement, threw the remaining herbs and resins into a small crack in the ice, closer to the bank where she stood. The fire, fueled by the wind, crackled for a brief moment before being almost extinguished. But the smoke, now denser and with an even stronger aroma, spiraled upwards, forming a dark curtain between her and the Goloso. The beasts, already restless with the first scent, howled, a sound Anya didn't hear but felt as a deep tremor in her chest. They moved, some advancing towards the new source of scent, others hesitating, confused. Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, Anya turned to the children. Their eyes, previously full of dread, now showed a flicker of hope mixed with perplexity. She raised her right hand, palm open, and moved it slowly to the right, indicating a direction. Then she pointed to the ice ahead, then to herself, and finally made a come gesture. It was a silent language, forged in years of life on the tundra, where communication often depended more on eyes and gestures than on words. Boris, her eldest grandson, just 10 years old, was the first to understand. His eyes met Anya's, and he nodded with a determination that seemed too large for his small body. He held Lena's hand, who was pale and trembling, and began to move, one step at a time, in the direction indicated by his grandmother. The other young people, seeing Boris's courage, began to follow, cautious, their movements slow and fearful. Each step was a silent prayer, each breath a whisper of hope. Anya retreated slightly, maintaining a safe distance from the most fragile edge, but always with her eyes fixed on the children. She felt every vibration of the ice beneath her feet, every tiny crack that formed. Her bare feet, accustomed to the cold, were her eyes on the treacherous surface. She guided the children with subtle gestures, moving her head, indicating with her eyes, sometimes pointing to a specific spot on the ice, an invisible path for those who lacked her sensitivity. The guloso, though distracted by the smoke and strong scent, were not foolish. Some of them were already beginning to bypass the smoke curtain, their red eyes fixed once again on the children. Time was running out. Anya felt the ice beneath Boris's feet give way slightly, a vibration almost imperceptible to anyone else, but a cry of alarm for her. She made an urgent gesture for him to stop, and Boris, with surprising agility, froze in place. Anya pointed to a spot to his left, a safer path that she felt was firmer. The tension was palpable, an invisible thread connecting Anya to the children and all of them to life. The wind howled, but the most terrifying sound was the silence for Anya, who only felt the pulse of the threat. She knew that with each second, each step, the danger increased. The sacred totem, which the children had tried to retrieve, now seemed insignificant before the impending tragedy. Only life mattered, the lives of her grandchildren, the future of her village. She was the bridge, the guardian, the only hope, and she would not fail. Anya would not fail. With her mind sharpened by urgency, she felt the ice beneath the children's feet as if it were an extension of her own body. Every vibration, every crack was a word in a language only she understood, a melody of the earth itself, ancient and primordial. Boris and Lena, holding hands tightly, advanced with tiny steps, their eyes fixed on their grandmother's gestures. Fear still paralyzed them, but faith in the elder was a beacon in the dread. The other young people of the village followed them, one after another, forming a fragile chain across the treacherous surface. The guloso, however, were not long in overcoming the initial distraction. Their red eyes, previously scattered by the aromatic smoke, now fixed intensely on the small figures on the ice. Anya felt the change in the ground's vibration. The horde was regrouping. The collective growl, which she perceived as a deep tremor, began to swell again, foreshadowing fury. The smoke, though still present, was no longer enough to mask the children's fear. One of the more audacious guloso, an enormous male with ancient scars, began to bypass the smoke curtain, his heavy steps making the ice tremble. Anya knew she needed more time, an even greater distraction. Her eyes swept the desolate landscape, searching for something to use to divert the beast's attention. It was then that she saw, not far off, a small mound of rocks covered in snow. Inside there was a small cave, a rudimentary shelter used by hunters. It was an immense risk, but an idea began to form in her mind. With a firm gesture, Anya indicated to the children to keep moving, pointing to a more distant point on the opposite bank. She knew the journey would be long and dangerous, but every meter was a victory. Then, without hesitation, she turned and began to run, not towards the children, but in the opposite direction, towards the mound of rocks. Her movements were agile for her age, her lean body cutting through the icy air with determination, defying nature itself. The Guloso, confused by the sudden change of target, hesitated for a moment. The scarred male, about to advance on the children, stopped, sniffing the air. Anya, running alone, seemed like easier, more accessible prey. With a guttural howl, he changed direction, followed by dozens of other Guloso, who abandoned the pursuit of the children to focus on the elder. It was exactly what Anya expected. She had become the bait, the diversion, the potential sacrifice for the salvation of her tribe. As she ran, Anya felt the ice beneath her feet, seeking the firmest points, less treacherous paths. She couldn't afford to fall. With each step, the vibration of the Guloso became more intense, more threatening. She could feel the earth tremble with the horde's approach, the heat and scent of their wild breath. But she didn't look back. Her eyes were fixed on the mound of rocks, her objective. The children, seeing their grandmother move away and the horde of Guloso following her, felt a new kind of terror, mixed with an understanding of the sacrifice she was making. Boris squeezed Lena's hand more tightly, and both, with tears and newfound strength, continued to advance, their small steps echoing the elder's courage. They knew that the only way to honor Anya's act was to survive. Anya reached the mound of rocks, her breath short, but her determination unwavering. She slipped into the small cave, a tight space that concealed her from the Guloso, despite the little protection. The furious beasts surrounded the mound, their growls reverberating off the rocks and ice, a chorus of fury and frustration. Anya, inside the cave, felt the vibration of every pore, every body, as if trapped in the heart of a storm. She had bought time, but for how long? And how would she get out of this trap? The lives of her grandchildren depended on her next move. Anya, huddled in the damp darkness of the small cave, felt the fury of the Guloso reverberate through the rocks. It wasn't just vibrations in the ground, it was an incessant hammering in the very air, an overwhelming pressure that seemed to compress her bones, making her body tremble. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, tried to discern any detail inside the grotto, searching for an exit or a new resource that could offer hope. The scent of wet earth and stone mixed with the wild, rancid odor of the beasts outside, a constant reminder of the imminent danger. She knew the distraction wouldn't last forever. The intelligence of the Guloso was legendary, and soon they would realize that the cave was not an endless hiding place. Outside, Boris and Lena, along with the other young people, watched the scene with heavy hearts. They saw the horde of Guloso surrounding the mound of rocks where Anya had disappeared, a dark, menacing stain against the infinite white. The air was heavy with tension, and the silence, for them, was even more terrifying than the muffled growls that barely reached their ears, a premonition of something terrible. Boris, with his pale face and lips chapped by the cold, felt Lena's hand tremble in his, a tremor that mirrored the dread in her eyes. "Will she be okay, Boris?" Lena whispered, her voice almost inaudible, but laden with a childlike plea. Boris just squeezed her hand tightly, unable to answer, his throat tight with fear. Their faith in their grandmother was immense, an unshakable pillar, but the sight of so many Guloso was overwhelming, crushing any remnant of optimism. They continued to advance, one step at a time, their eyes fixed on the direction Anya had pointed before turning, each movement a silent tribute to the elder's courage. Inside the cave, Anya groped the walls, her calloused fingers finding irregularities in the cold stone. She felt an icy draft, faint but perceptible, coming from a narrow crevice at the back of the grotto. A passage. It was too small for a Guloso, but perhaps she could squeeze through. However, exiting that way would mean abandoning the distraction that kept the beasts away from the children. She needed something more, something that would keep the Guloso occupied longer, a strategy that would buy vital minutes. Her eyes fell upon some loose stones on the cave floor, and an audacious, almost desperate idea began to form in her astute mind. She began to stack the stones, one by one, with care and precision, despite the darkness and the urgency that consumed her. It wasn't a wall, but an ingenious trap. With the help of some dry and frozen branches she found, she created an unstable structure, but one that, with a strategic push, could collapse with a crash. The objective was not to harm the Guloso, but to create a deafening noise, a confusion that would make them hesitate and gain a few more precious minutes, perhaps even scare them away temporarily. With each stone placed, she felt the vibration of the Guloso outside, the impatience growing in their massive bodies, fury bubbling. Meanwhile, the children had covered a considerable distance, but the ice beneath their feet became increasingly unstable, more treacherous. Boris felt a stronger crack and a new fissure appeared, thin as a hair, but menacing, spreading before him like a deadly web. He stopped abruptly, pulling Lena back with a protective reflex. Panic returned to tighten his chest, an icy knot in his throat. Without Anya to guide them, to feel the way, they were lost, at the mercy of the ice and darkness. They looked back at the mound of rocks, a distant silhouette against the icy horizon, and at the horde of Guloso that still surrounded it. Their outlines diffuse in the cold mist. Hope began to drain away, replaced by an icy despair that threatened to paralyze them. Anya, finishing her ingenious stone trap, felt the change in the ice vibrations beneath her feet. The children were in danger again, the ice giving way under their small weights. There was no more time for subtleties or hesitation. With a final effort, she pushed the pile of stones with all her might. The crash was deafening, even for her, who only felt the force of the vibration in the air, a shock that coursed through her entire body. The stones rolled and fell, causing a chaotic noise, like distant thunder that echoed across the tundra. The Guloso, caught by surprise by the sudden sound, retreated, some howling in confusion and alarm, their enormous bodies colliding with each other. It was the moment. Anya, without looking back, slipped through the narrow crevice, her aged body contorting to pass, tearing a bit of her clothing. She would emerge at another, more distant point, and hoped that the new distraction would be enough for the children to reach safety. With every inch she advanced, the lives of her grandchildren weighed on her heart, a silent promise that she would not give up. Anya wriggled through the crevice, the rough stones scratching her skin and the fabric of her parka. The passage was tight, dark, and cold, but the promise of an exit, of another chance for her grandchildren, propelled her. Finally, with a last effort, she slid out, emerging into a small rocky alcove, a little further from the main mound of rocks. The icy air whipped her face, and she felt the intensity of the cold, which seemed to have deepened even further. Her eyes swept the landscape, searching for the small, colored specks that were the children, and her heart tightened as she saw them still on the ice, though they had advanced a little. The Guloso, behind her, was still in an uproar. The crash of the stones had caused widespread confusion, and the horde moved in disordered circles around the mound of rocks, their growls and howls, which Anya felt as chaotic vibrations in the ground, indicating their frustration and disorientation. They were sniffing the air, looking for her, but the crevice through which she had escaped was imperceptible to their crude nostrils. Anya knew the advantage was temporary. The intelligence of these beasts was a formidable adversary, and soon they would realize that she was no longer trapped. Her eyes fixed on Boris and Lena. They were closer to the bank, but the path ahead seemed even more dangerous. Anya felt the ice beneath her own feet, a subtle but clear vibration that the surface was becoming thinner, more unstable. The lake, vast and treacherous, seemed to whisper danger. She needed to guide them, but from a safe distance without attracting the Guloso in their direction again. With her mind working fast, Anya observed the wind. It was changing, bringing with it a thin, icy mist that began to form over the lake. It was a blessing in disguise. The mist could conceal the children from the hungry eyes of the Guloso, but it would also hinder their vision and her own for guiding them. It was a race against time, against nature, and against the beasts. She groped the rocky ground where she stood, and her fingers found a small stone, sharp and irregular. It wasn't much, but it could serve. With a swift movement, Anya threw it with all her might towards a more distant point on the lake where the ice seemed more solid. The stone ricocheted, producing a dry, sharp sound that, though faint to human ears, was an anomaly in the silent vastness. The Guloso, some of them already beginning to calm down, turned their heads, sniffing the air and feeling the vibration of the impact. Most of them, still irritated by the previous confusion, began to move in the direction of the sound, attracted by the new distraction. Anya watched, her heart beating hard, feeling the change in the horde's movement. It was a risk, but she needed to keep their attention away from the children. The mist, now denser, began to envelop the landscape, transforming the lake into a sea of indistinct white. Boris and Lena, feeling the ice crack beneath their feet and the mist closing in, were terrified. They didn't see Anya, but felt her presence, an invisible force that propelled them. Boris looked at Lena, his eyes full of tears, but also with a new determination. "We have to go," he said, his voice choked. "Grandma is protecting us." They squeezed hands and continued, their steps now faster. Almost a race against time, blindly trusting the elders' wisdom. Anya, in the rocky alcove, felt every step of the children, every vibration of the ice, every movement of the Guloso. The mist was a barrier, but also a veil that connected her to them in an even deeper way. She needed one last act, a final sacrifice to ensure their safety. Her eyes turned to a specific point on the bank, where a deep crevice in the rock opened, a place she knew well. It was a dangerous path, but it could be the key. The lives of her grandchildren depended on her courage, and Anya, the silent guardian, was ready to face the abyss once more. Anya, the silent guardian, was ready to face the abyss once more. Her eyes fixed on the deep crevice in the rock, a dark cut in the icy landscape that she had known since she was a girl. It wasn't just a crevice, it was an almost forgotten passage, a secret of the earth that few dared to explore. The entrance was narrow, but it promised a path, perhaps a chance to flank the Guloso, or to create a final decisive distraction. With a last look at the mist that swallowed the children, a silent prayer rose from her heart. She couldn't hear it, but she felt its strength, a flame of hope in her chest. She approached the crevice, feeling the cold air emanating from its depths. The Guloso, still disoriented by the thrown stone, began to regroup, their growls, which Anya felt as a growing tremor in the ground, indicating their patience was running out. She needed to act fast. Carefully, Anya squeezed through the opening, her aged, thin body meeting resistance from the sharp rocks. Darkness swallowed her, and the cold intensified, an icy embrace that seemed to suck the life from her bones. She advanced by groping, her sensitive fingers mapping the irregular walls, feeling the dampness and ice that covered the passage's interior. Outside, Boris and Lena struggled against the mist and treacherous ice. Each step was a gamble, each muffled sound a reason for their hearts to race. The mist was so dense that they could barely see each other, and the bank, which once seemed so close, now became a distant and unattainable mirage. "Grandma!" Lena called, her voice trembling and thin, lost in the white immensity. Boris didn't answer, just squeezed her hand, trying to convey a courage he barely felt, an icy knot in his throat. He knew Anya was doing something. He felt it in every vibration of the ice, in every breath of wind that seemed to guide their feet. But uncertainty was a heavy burden that threatened to crush them. Anya, inside the crevice, felt a change. The passage was not a straight tunnel as she remembered. Instead, it opened into an underground chamber, a wide and icy space, where the faint light filtering through a crack in the ceiling revealed a surprising sight. In the center of the chamber, there was a small underground lake, its surface covered by a thin layer of ice, and in its middle, almost untouched, was the sacred totem the children had tried to retrieve. It glowed with a soft greenish light, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness and despair. This was the turning point. The totem was not lost in the main lake, but hidden here, in a secret sanctuary of the earth. Anya felt the energy of the place, an ancient and powerful vibration that resonated with her own soul, an ancestral call. But how to use it, and how to get it out? The chamber was an apparent dead end, and the Goloso were outside, getting closer. She needed a plan that would unite the totem's ancestral wisdom with her cunning and the urgency of the moment. Her eyes swept the chamber, searching for an exit, an opportunity, anything that could turn the tide. She noticed a series of small ice stalactites hanging from the ceiling, some as thin as needles, others more robust. A dangerous but brilliant idea began to form in her mind. Meanwhile, the Goloso, having finally realized that Anya was no longer at the mound of rocks, began to spread out, sniffing the air with renewed fury, their growls becoming more organized, more threatening. They were approaching the crevice, sensing the elders' trail. Anya felt the vibration of their heavy paws, the urgency becoming an incessant drum in her chest. She needed to act now, before it was too late. With concentrated effort, she approached the underground lake, feeling the fragility of the ice beneath her bare feet. The totem was within her reach, glowing, but the risk was immense. She extended her hand, her fingers almost touching the cold, smooth surface, a silent connection with the essence of her tribe, with the future of her grandchildren. The ice cracked, a dry, frightening sound that echoed in the chamber, and a thin crack formed right before her eyes, threatening to swallow her. Anya felt the ice beneath her fingers crack once more, the fissure deepening like a frozen spider web. The cold air of the underground chamber seemed to suck the oxygen from her lungs, but she didn't hesitate. Her eyes, fixed on the totem that glowed with a greenish light, conveyed an urgency that transcended fear. Ancestral wisdom whispered in her mind, not in words, but in sensations, in a deep knowledge of ice and stone. She knew that totem was not just an object. It was a link to the very soul of the earth, a catalyst of energies that she, in her deafness, could feel with an intensity no one else understood. With a precise movement, Anya extended her hand, not to grasp the totem, but to touch it gently. The instant her calloused fingers brushed the cold, smooth surface, a wave of energy coursed through her body, a vibration that connected her even more deeply to the environment. She felt the ice beneath her feet, not just as a threat, but as an extension of her being, revealing its weak and strong points. The crack stopped expanding for a moment, as if the earth itself responded to her touch. Outside, the Goloso were now very close to the crevice. Anya felt the ground tremble with the force of their paws. The growls, which for her were a constant and violent hammering, indicating that they had found the cave entrance. They were sniffing, their massive bodies blocking the little light that filtered in. The pressure in the air increased, and Anya knew she had no more than a few seconds before they tried to force their way through. Her eyes moved quickly across the ice stalactites on the chamber ceiling. There were many of varied sizes, some hanging precariously. With the totem in her hands, now she had held it firmly, she felt a new idea form. It wasn't about knocking down one or two. It was about creating a symphony of collapses. an event that would echo and disorient the beasts in a way that the simple noise of falling stones could not. Anya raised the totem above her head, feeling its energy pulse. She wouldn't use it as a physical weapon, but as a focus, an extension of her own will. With intense concentration, she directed the energy, the vibrations, towards the most fragile stalactites. It was an immense risk. The collapse could hit her or block her own exit, but the lives of her grandchildren were more important than any personal danger. On the frozen lake, Boris and Lena could barely see each other through the dense mist. The ice beneath their feet continued to crack, and the fear was almost unbearable. They heard a distant sound, a louder growl, and knew the Goloso were near their grandmother. Tears streamed down both their frozen faces, but they continued to advance, one hesitant step after another, propelled by faith. "Grandma, please," Lena whispered, her voice choked. Suddenly, a deafening sound, like 1,000 thunders falling at once, erupted from the underground chamber. It wasn't a single crash, but a cascade of cracks, fissures, and collapses as the stalactites, struck by Anya's focused energy and the totem's vibration, began to detach from the ceiling. The ice of the underground lake cracked and gave way under the impact, releasing a roar of water and ice that reverberated throughout the earth. The chamber filled with a sonic and vibratory chaos. The Goloso outside, who were already forcing the entrance of the crevice, were caught by surprise. The noise was so intense, the vibrations so powerful, that it made them retreat in panic. Some howled in pain and confusion, their bodies colliding with each other. The crevice, now partially blocked by fallen pieces of ice and rock, became a trap. Anya had created a private earthquake, an event that would disorient them long enough. Anya, protecting the totem against her chest, felt the impact of the collapse, but remained standing. The chamber was filled with ice dust and the air was dense, but she felt a new current of air. The ice cascade had revealed a new passage, narrow and dark, but unobstructed. It was an exit. And more importantly, the sound and confusion were drawing the Goloso away from the main crevice. She had bought time, but now she needed to find the children. With the totem firmly in her hands, Anya turned to the new passage, feeling the way with her feet and her soul. She knew that every second was vital. Her grandchildren were out there, lost in the mist and treacherous ice. She was the only one who could guide them, the only one who could feel the safe path. The connection with the totem and the earth was her compass. She would not fail. The lives of her grandchildren depended on her courage, and Anya, the silent guardian, was ready for another act of faith and sacrifice. Anya, with the totem firmly pressed against her chest, advanced through the newly revealed passage. The air there was even colder and damper, laden with the scent of wet earth and ancient ice that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. The darkness was almost absolute, but for Anya, who lived in a world of heightened sensations, the absence of light was not an impediment. Her calloused feet groped the uneven ground, feeling every protrusion, every depression, every small stone that could divert her path. The rocky wall to her right was a constant guide, her rough fingers sliding over the cold, damp stone, a silent connection with the mountain itself. She felt the vibration of the totem in her hands, a soft but persistent energy that seemed to map the path ahead, indicating the safest points, the directions to follow, like a heart beating in unison with hers. Outside, Boris and Lena were exhausted, every muscle in their bodies aching from the effort and the cold. The crash, coming from their grandmother's cave, had been frightening, a tremor that made the ice beneath their feet vibrate violently, but it also brought a strange and powerful sense of relief. It was their grandmother they knew, with a certainty that transcended logic. She was fighting. She was doing something for them. The mist, however, made each step an agonizing ordeal. They could barely see the tips of their own feet. And the bank, which once seemed so close, now seemed to have disappeared completely, swallowed by the indistinct white. Lena stumbled again, and Boris held her tightly, his own knees trembling from cold and exhaustion, fear returning to tighten his chest. "I can't go on, Boris," she cried, her voice choked with despair and exhaustion. "We're lost, and the Guloso—" Boris felt a knot in his throat, but refused to give in to the panic that threatened to paralyze them. "No, Lena, Grandma would never leave us. She's coming, I feel it." He squeezed her hand with all the strength he had left, trying to infuse a bit of his own faith, however faint, into his sister's heart. Meanwhile, the Guloso, though momentarily disoriented by the collapse of the stalactites, were not creatures of easy surrender. Anya felt the vibrations of their heavy paws, now more dispersed, but still present, like a menacing hum in the earth. They were sniffing, their primary instincts guiding them away from the blocked crevice, but not away from the children's scent, which the treacherous wind began to spread. The horde was moving, bypassing the mound of rocks, seeking another entrance, another way to reach their prey. The elder knew that time was her cruelest enemy, slipping like sand through her fingers. The passage Anya was following began to incline upwards, and she felt a fresh current of air, an unmistakable sign that she was approaching the surface. The totem in her hands pulsed with more intensity, as if pulling her towards a specific point, a silent beacon. She felt a growing urgency, a premonition that the forest edge, where safety awaited them, was closer than ever. But the lake ice, she knew, was the last and most treacherous barrier, a thin veil over an abyss. With a final effort, Anya squeezed through a narrow opening, emerging into a small grove of dwarf pines whose twisted branches were covered in snow and ice, forming ghostly sculptures. The icy air whipped her face, but she didn't feel the cold, only the pressing need to find her grandchildren. Her eyes swept the mist, searching for the outlines of her grandchildren. She didn't see them, but felt their vibrations, faint and desperate, coming from a not-too-distant point. They were dangerously close to the bank, but the ice there was even thinner, almost a transparent film over the dark waters. Anya felt the ground tremble with more force. The Guloso! They had found a way, bypassing the mound of rocks and the crevice. The horde was approaching, their growls now more audible, more menacing, filling the air with a promise of imminent danger that made the elder's heart tighten. She needed to act. There was no more time for elaborate distractions. She needed to guide the children directly, using the only thing she could offer, her intimate knowledge of the ice, forged by decades of life in the tundra. With the totem still in her hands, Anya knelt, touching the snow and ice-covered ground with her palm. She closed her eyes, concentrating, feeling every vibration, every tiny fracture in the lake ice, as if they were veins in her own body. It was as if the lake itself spoke to her, revealing its secrets, its points of strength and weakness. She felt a path, a thin, almost invisible line of more solid ice that snaked across the treacherous surface, leading directly to the bank where she stood. It was a dangerous path, yes, but it was the only one. She stood up, her heart beating hard, not from fear, but from a fierce determination that propelled her. She needed to signal to the children without attracting the Guloso in their direction. Her eyes fell upon a small mound of loose stones near the bank, some sharp, others rounded by time. With a swift and calculated movement, Anya began to throw the stones one by one at specific points on the ice. They were not random throws, but silent messages, carefully calculated vibrations to guide her grandchildren, creating a trail of safety through the danger. Boris and Lena, lost in the mist, felt the vibrations of the stones. It wasn't a loud sound, but a soft touch on the ice beneath their feet, a series of small pulses that seemed to come from a specific direction, like a call. They looked at each other, a new hope igniting in their eyes, momentarily pushing away despair. "Grandma!" Lena exclaimed, her voice full of renewed joy and unshakable faith. Boris nodded, his pale face lighting up with a faint smile. They began to follow the vibrations, blindly trusting the elder, each step an act of faith and courage, knowing that everyone's life depended on that silent guide. Anya watched, her heart tight, feeling the proximity of the Guloso, but also the unbreakable determination of her grandchildren. She could not fail. Anya could not fail. The thought, a steel thread in her mind, was stronger than the cold or the fear. She felt the earth vibrate beneath her feet, the incessant drumming of the approaching Guloso. The wild scent, softened by the mist, arrived as an urgent warning. Her eyes swept the dense white, but she trusted her sensations, her connection with the ice. With the totem pulsing against her chest, Anya threw another stone, with precision at a firm point on the ice. The vibration propagated, a silent call. Boris and Lena, pale faces and chapped lips, felt the pulse beneath their feet. It was a promise, a guide. They hurried, hearts pounding, hope mixed with the terror of each crack. Behind them, the other 5 children of the village, whimpering or with wide eyes, followed, a chain of lost children, guided by faith. Anya felt the weight of the Guloso, the earth trembling with their rush. They had found a weak point on the bank, a path to the children. She needed one last effort, a sacrifice. Her eyes fell upon a fallen tree trunk, covered in snow, extending over the thin ice, almost to the bank. It was a makeshift bridge, dangerous, but the only chance. With a determination that defied her age, Anya ran to the trunk. Each step was a prayer, pure will. She felt the ice beneath the trunk vibrate alarmingly, about to give way. The Guloso were just a few meters away, their growls a deep roar that Anya felt, a premonition of catastrophe. She clung to the trunk, aged hands on the rough bark. With monumental effort, she pushed it, making it turn so that the most solid part fell onto the resistant ice, creating a stable passage. Her muscles screamed, but she didn't stop. The lives of her grandchildren depended on it. Boris and Lena, following the vibrations of the stones and feeling the tremor of the earth, saw their grandmother's silhouette through the mist. She was on the trunk, struggling against the weight of the wood. Boris's heart tightened. He knew what she was doing. "Grandma!" he cried, his voice hoarse, full of despair and love. Anya didn't hear the cry, but felt the urgency in the children's steps. With a final push, the trunk gave way, turning and falling with a dull thud onto the ice, creating a safe bridge. The ice beneath the trunk cracked, but didn't give way. It was their chance. The Guloso, at the edge of the lake, hesitated. Anya, exhausted with a flame of victory in her eyes, pointed to the trunk, gesturing to the children. "Run!" she thought, projecting the urgency. Boris and Lena were the first. With a leap of faith, they jumped onto the trunk, their feet slipping, but finding purchase. The others followed, small bodies trembling, propelled by the sight of their grandmother, who, at the other end of the trunk, extended her hands. The ice beneath the Guloso began to crack, but they didn't advance. The mist seemed to clear, revealing the bank, the forest, salvation. Anya stood there, a rock of courage, waiting. Anya stood there, a rock of courage, waiting, her eyes fixed on her grandchildren who, one by one, began to cross the trunk. Boris was the first, his feet hesitant but firm, seeking balance on the slippery surface. Lena came right behind, her face pale and eyes wide, but with a silent determination that Anya felt in each vibrant step. The elder extended her hands, a beacon of safe arrival. She felt the totem pulse against her chest, a source of warmth and strength that connected her to the earth and her loved ones. The other 5 children of the village, small and frightened, began to follow, pushing each other with the urgency of fear. Their whimpers and gasps were small vibrations in the icy air, which Anya felt in her heart. She watched every movement, every stumble, every small hand reaching for support. The mist now seemed to open slightly, revealing the children's fragile silhouette against the white of the landscape. The earth beneath Anya's feet trembled with increasing intensity. The Guloso. They weren't just growling. They were testing the ice, some bolder, taking small steps on the treacherous surface, their massive bodies appearing even larger in the mist. Anya felt the vibration of every pore, the weight of every creature, and knew that time was rapidly running out. The wild scent, previously softened, now grew stronger, a pungent warning of imminent danger. Boris reached the end of the trunk where Anya stood, his eyes meeting hers in pure connection. Relief and love were palpable. Anya gently pulled him to the bank, her calloused fingers squeezing her grandson's cold little hand. Lena came next, falling into her grandmother's arms, who hugged her tightly, feeling the tremor in her small body. It was a quick embrace, but full of affection and gratitude. "Grandma," Lena whispered, her voice muffled by the hug, but Anya felt the vibration of the word. She squeezed tighter. As the other children hurried across the trunk, Anya realized that the horde of Guloso was becoming bolder. Some were already on the ice, moving cautiously, but with relentless determination. The ice beneath them cracked and groaned, but hunger propelled them. Anya felt the danger approaching like a cold, heavy wave. She needed to get everyone to the safety of the forest, and fast. With the totem still in her hands, Anya turned to the arriving children. She pointed to the dense forest behind her, its snow-laden branches offering refuge. "Run!" she gestured with her hands, her expression serious but hopeful. "Run to the trees! Don't look back!" Boris, already on the bank, understood. He took Lena's hand and pulled her towards the vegetation, the other children following, their small bodies moving with new urgency. Their grandmother was the promise of safety, but Anya did not follow them. She felt the ice beneath the trunk vibrate with the Guloso's approach. The horde concentrated on the passage, crowding at the edge of the ice, growls in a menacing chorus. Anya knew she needed to buy time, create one last barrier. Her eyes swept the bank. A large rock covered in frozen moss lay there. With effort, Anya bent down, aged hands gripping its base. She felt her muscles protest, but the image of her grandchildren gave her strength. She needed to move the rock, block the path. It was a desperate act, a final sacrifice. Anya, with the totem vibrating against her chest, concentrated all the strength and wisdom of her years on the Herculean task of moving the rock. Her aged and tired muscles screamed in protest, every fiber stretched to its limit. The intense cold seemed to solidify in her bones, but the image of Boris and Lena's frightened faces, the despair in the eyes of the other children, was a fire that burned within her, warming her with unshakable determination. She pushed, her calloused feet seeking purchase on the slippery snow, her body bent like a taut bow. The heavy rock seemed to mock her effort, but Anya did not give up. She felt the earth beneath the rock, how it fit into the soil, and sought the perfect leverage point, ancestral knowledge beyond brute strength. With a grunt that escaped her chapped lips, she used her body weight, swaying, and with a calculated movement, the rock yielded slightly, scraping against the frozen ground. The impatient Guloso did not wait. The horde, a few meters from the bank, advanced onto the ice en masse, their growls transforming into a terrifying chorus that made the earth tremble. Anya felt every step, every vibration of their massive bodies. The ice beneath them groaned and cracked with more intensity, thin fissures spreading like veins on the surface. Some predators, the boldest ones, were already on the trunk that had served as a bridge. Their eyes fixed on the forest where the children ran. Boris and Lena, along with the other children, ran desperately into the forest. The icy air burned their lungs, but they didn't stop. The sound of the Guloso's growls, now closer, was a whip at their backs. Boris, holding Lena's hand, looked back for an instant. The mist opened, and he saw his grandmother, a small, solitary figure, still struggling with the rock, the Guloso approaching her like a dark, relentless wave. Boris's heart broke. "Grandma!" he cried, but his voice was lost in the wind and the roar of the beasts. Lena, sensing her brother's hesitation, pulled him hard. "We can't stop Boris. She wants us to run." The terrified children trusted their grandmother, knowing Anya was doing what needed to be done. With a final effort, which seemed to wring the last drop of energy from her being, Anya succeeded. The rock, with a dry, dragging sound, turned and settled into a strategic point, blocking direct access to the trunk. It wasn't insurmountable, but an obstacle, a diversion that would buy precious seconds. The elder fell to her knees, panting, her hands trembling, her body exhausted. The totem, still in her hands, seemed to pulse with a weaker light, as if it too had exhausted its energies. The frustrated Guloso howled. The horde crashed against the rock, some trying to climb it, others seeking a way around. The momentary confusion was Anya's victory, but ephemeral. The ice beneath the rock weakened, gave way under the weight and fury of the predators. Deep cracks formed, and the dark water of the underground lake bubbled to the surface. Anya felt the vibration, the imminent collapse. She was trapped, the ice giving way beneath her feet. The Guloso just steps away, hungry eyes fixed on her. There was nowhere to go. The bank, now more distant, seemed unreachable. The icy air sucked her life away, but in her eyes there was no fear, only tranquil acceptance and fierce determination. She had bought time for her grandchildren, and that was enough. With the totem pressed against her chest, Anya closed her eyes, feeling the final vibration of the ice before it broke. With the totem pressed against her chest, Anya closed her eyes, feeling the final vibration of the ice before it broke. It wasn't a fall into the void, but a controlled dive. The instant the surface gave way beneath her feet, Anya, with a cunning forged by decades of life in the tundra, propelled herself forward and downward, using her own body weight and intimate knowledge of ice formations. She didn't fall into the abyss of dark water, but slid down an ice ramp that had broken off, landing with a dull thud in a pile of deep, soft snow, hidden under a rocky overhang. The impact was strong, but the snow cushioned the fall. Behind her, however, disaster unfolded on a monumental scale. The horde of Guloso, driven by hunger and fury, advanced en masse onto the already weakened ice. The combined weight of 700 beasts was too much. With a deafening crash that Anya felt in every bone, the lake ice shattered over a vast expanse. Not just where she was, but creating an abyss of dark water and broken ice between the bank and most of the horde. Many Guloso, caught by surprise, fell into the icy water, their growls transforming into howls of shock and disorientation as they struggled to get out, their paws slipping on the wet ice. Others, at the edge of the collapse, retreated, confused and frustrated, the path to their prey blocked by a sea of unstable ice. Anya, panting and trembling, pulled herself from the snow. The damp cold of the water bubbling in the newly formed abyss rose to her, but her eyes, now open, didn't see danger but opportunity. The totem was still safe in her hands, and a wave of deep relief washed over her, quickly replaced by the urgency to find her grandchildren. She was safe, but they were still lost in the forest. Boris and Lena, hidden among the dwarf pines with the other children, felt the gigantic tremor of the earth. The sound, though muffled by distance and mist, was unmistakable. The ice had given way. An icy terror struck them, but soon transformed into a strange and powerful certainty. Their grandmother. She had done something. Boris, with a knot in his throat, squeezed Lena's hand. "She's okay," he whispered, more to himself than to his sister, but with unshakable faith. "We have to find her." Anya, though still shaken, concentrated. She felt the vibration of the earth, now calmer, but still with the echo of the Guloso's confusion on the other side of the abyss. And more importantly, she felt a faint, almost imperceptible thread of hope and fear coming from the forest. Her grandchildren. She stood up, her muscles protesting, and began to grope her way, seeking a passage, a detour. The totem pulsed softly, guiding her through the snow-covered rocks, revealing a narrow crevice that would lead her back to the surface, a little further from the original bank. Boris, feeling a silent call, an intuition that pulled him, began to guide the other children back to the edge of the forest, towards the site of the collapse. The mist began to dissipate slightly, as if nature itself was clearing the way for their reunion. And then they saw her. Anya, emerging from behind a snowdrift, the totem in her hands, a small but imposing figure against the white landscape. Her eyes met Boris's, and a wave of emotion passed through them. No words were spoken. Anya extended her arms, and Boris and Lena ran to her, plunging into her embrace, their small bodies trembling with cold and relief. The other 5 children of the village followed, crowding around the elder, seeking the safety of her presence. On the other side of the abyss, the Goloso howled in frustration, but could not cross. The danger had passed. That embrace, silent and tight, was the promise that life, family and courage would always find a way, even in the merciless vastness of Yakutia. That embrace, silent and tight, was the promise that life, family and courage would always find a way, even in the merciless vastness of Yakutia. The warmth of the small bodies of Boris and Lena, and the other 5 children of the village, was a balm for Anya's exhausted soul. She felt every beat of their hearts, every tremor of relief, and knew that the danger for now had receded. The Goloso, though still howling in frustration from the other side of the newly formed abyss, were now a contained threat, separated by a sea of unstable ice. With a gentle nod, Anya indicated for the children to move further into the forest. Boris, once again, took the lead, pulling Lena by the hand, his eyes still fixed on his grandmother, as if fearing she might disappear. The trees, previously just a refuge, now seemed to embrace them, their snow-heavy branches offering protective cover. The air, though still icy, seemed less biting, and the mist began to dissipate completely, revealing a pale gray sky. As they moved away from the lake, Anya felt the energy of the earth, a rhythmic pulsation that spoke of life and resilience. The totem in her hands, previously a beacon of urgency, now radiated a serene calm, as if its mission was accomplished. She pressed it against her chest, feeling the deep connection with the ancestors who had guided her. It wasn't long before the sounds of the village reached them. Cries of relief, hurried footsteps in the snow. The adults, led by Boris and Lena's parents, had finally found a safe path to the bank after the ice collapse. Their faces, previously contorted by despair, now lit up with indescribable joy as they saw the children safe and sound and Anya standing among them. The reunion was a whirlwind of emotions, tight hugs, warm tears that streamed down faces marked by cold and worry. Boris and Lena's parents ran to their children, enveloping them in embraces that seemed to want to compensate for all the fear and uncertainty. The community gathered around Anya, their eyes filled with respect and gratitude. They didn't need words. The story was etched in the children's faces and in the elders' imposing presence. Anya, exhausted, but with her heart overflowing, felt the strength of her village. She was deaf to sounds, but not to the emotions that vibrated in the air: love, relief, admiration. She raised the totem, showing it to the community. It was a symbol not only of ancestral wisdom, but of unity, courage, and sacrifice that kept them alive in the frozen vastness. That night, under the flickering light of the bonfires, the village celebrated. Not with noisy festivities, but with a reverent silence which spoke louder than any song. The children, warmed and fed, slept deeply, their dreams free of guloso and cracked ice. Anya, sitting by the fire, watched her grandchildren, their serene faces reflecting the flame. She felt the unbreakable connection that united them, the invisible web of love and responsibility that permeated every life. The overcoming of that day was not just a victory over relentless nature and hungry beasts. It was a reaffirmation that the true strength of a people lies in their ability to care for one another, to honor their elders, and to protect their young. Anya, the silent guardian, had proven that wisdom is not limited to what is heard, but flourishes in intuition, courage, and altruism. Her story would be told for generations, a reminder that, even in the most extreme cold, the warmth of the human heart can move mountains and melt the most treacherous ice. Yakutia would continue to be a challenge, but Anya's village, strengthened by the ordeal, was ready to face it, united, resilient, and full of hope. The future, though uncertain, was now a path to be trodden with the certainty that life always finds a way to flourish, guided by the light of unconditional love. The future, though uncertain, was now a path to be trodden with the certainty that life always finds a way to flourish, guided by the light of unconditional love. The next morning dawned with a different silence in the village. It wasn't the oppressive silence of fear, but a reverent quietude filled with gratitude and a new understanding of life. The pale sun of Yakutia, which barely dared to peek through the heavy clouds, illuminated the freshly fallen snow, making it sparkle like diamonds. The bonfires, which had burned all night, now dwindled, but the warmth emanating from them was more than physical. It was the warmth of a united community. Anya woke before everyone, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her skin. The totem, still in her hands, seemed to have absorbed the night's energy, vibrating with renewed strength. She stood up, her muscles still sore, but her spirit unshakable. Her eyes swept the sleeping village, and a soft, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Her grandchildren Boris and Lena slept side by side, curled up in warm furs, their childlike faces serene. Anya approached them, kneeling. With a light touch, she caressed Boris's hair, then Lena's, feeling the pulsating life in each one. It was a gesture of love that transcended words, a silent promise of protection and continuity. When the first rays of light touched the tents, the village began to awaken. The adults emerged from their dwellings, their eyes meeting Anya's with a mixture of respect and admiration. No one needed to speak. The story of what had happened was etched in their hearts, a living legend that would be told and retold. The lake, now an abyss of broken ice and dark water, was a grim reminder of the danger, but also of the miracle. The Guloso had dispersed, their howls of frustration lost in the vastness of the tundra, but the lesson of their ferocity would remain. Boris and Lena were the first to approach their grandmother. Their eyes, once full of terror, now shone with a new light, a mixture of reverence and an even deeper love. They didn't see her just as the wise elder, but as the heroine who defied the impossible. Boris took Anya's hand, and Lena hugged her around the waist, resting her head on her hip. Anya felt the warmth of their small bodies, the unbreakable connection that united them. She knew that from that day on, they would carry with them not only the memory of fear, but the strength of courage and altruism. In the days that followed, the village dedicated itself to strengthening its bonds. Daily tasks, previously performed with a monotonous routine, were now carried out with a new sense of purpose. The men went out to hunt with renewed determination. The women wove and prepared food with soft songs that spoke of hope. The children, in turn, played near the village, but with a silent respect for the lake and Anya's wisdom. They learned to observe, to feel the vibrations of the earth, to understand that nature, though merciless, also offered signs and paths for those who knew how to listen, or rather to feel Anya, the silent guardian, continued to be the heart of the village. Her presence, previously a pillar of wisdom, now was a beacon of hope. She sat by the fire, the totem in her hands, and the children gathered around her, absorbing her silent lessons. She taught with gestures, with the sparkle in her eyes, with the way she touched the earth. Boris and Lena, in particular, became her most dedicated apprentices, eager to understand the world through their grandmother's eyes and senses. They knew that true strength did not lie in hearing, but in the ability to feel, to intuit, to love without limits. The story of Anya and the Guloso became part of the tapestry of the village, a tale of resilience that would be passed down from generation to generation. Yakutia, with its harsh winters and constant challenges, would continue to test the strength of its people. But the village, now more united and more aware of its own inner strength, was ready. They had learned that, even in the darkest moments, the light of courage and unconditional love could guide the way, transforming fear into hope and vulnerability into an unshakable strength. And so, under the vast icy sky, life flourished, a silent testament to the strength of the human spirit.